All right, the other developing story, of course, still in the United States, still no definitive results in their elections. Well, our political editor, Sbu Ngalwa, joins us. I don't know where he's been finding the sleep over the last few days. Sbu, good afternoon to you. How's this electoral map looking now? Obviously, a couple of key states, Pennsylvania, one or two others that we're waiting for.
Well, Stephen, the reality is that it looks like it's going to be a day or another day or two of the long wait. As you can see, if you look at the map, let's just step out of the short and call up the map. All of those states that have yet to be concluded, that map has been looking like that for quite a while now, and we see there is some results trickling in here and there, and the reason for that is because of the mail-in votes that have had to come in at this particular election, and we know that we've had an unprecedented number of those mail-in votes, about 100 million of them. So you can see there are those areas where that are a shade of red. You can see that's where the Republicans are leading, and where you see a shade of blue, not the dark blue, that's where the Democrats are leading. Where you see the dark shades of both colors is where they are definitely, those are the states that have been called. Obviously now, if you look at the numbers, you can see that Joe Biden is sitting pretty there with about 243 of those seats. It's just 17 seats shy of the 270 that is required. But now this battle has moved to the particular states, particularly Pennsylvania, because as you know, Pennsylvania, in terms of the electoral college system, there are 20 votes that are coming from Pennsylvania, and there Trump had started with a huge majority where he actually led by about 600,000 of those votes, and now that margin is slowly narrowing down to about 160, and we know that the Trump campaign actually is paying much attention to Pennsylvania. We saw Rudy Giuliani visiting that state earlier along with two of Trump's children, just to drum up what looks like is their next strategy going forward, Stephen, because it looks like they will be going to the courts. They've approached the courts in Pennsylvania. They had to, they've also instituted lawsuits in other states, including Georgia, where Trump still has a slight lead. But if you can see that 89% of the votes have been counted in Pennsylvania. As I said, that margin started with a huge gulf. It's now narrowed down, and if we follow the analogy and the understanding that most of those mail-in ballots were for the Democratic Party, then it means that Joe Biden, in fact, he did address the media last night where he said that he feels quite confident that actually he will win Pennsylvania. So it looks like, Stephen, it won't be today, it may not even be tomorrow, because we do think that the Trump campaign is planning to take legal action to challenge some of these results in some of these states.
And I mean, we've had this conversation over the last few days and perhaps in the last few weeks. If you're a voter, you don't want this decided by the courts. You want this decided by a count. And yet it could come down to the judges.
Well, the reality is, that's the beauty of democracy, though. You know, if we cannot agree, then we pass it on to the courts. But remember, Trump, even when he addressed he had a press conference at the White House, he actually said he will take this to the Supreme Court. But the legal pundits are saying, hold on, it may not be that quick, because you still have to go through other legal processes within the states before it gets to the Supreme Court, which is the apex court in America. But I think it talks to his thinking. He already has his mind in the apex court of the country, which is the Supreme Court, because you would know that before this election, the issue of the Supreme Court was a major talking point in the United States as it related to the replacement, in fact the appointment of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, which Trump and the Republicans kind of pushed through the through the legislature to make sure that she's elected, and that gives the what they call a 6-3 majority in favor of the Republicans. Well, whether the court ends up deciding or being partisan in its decisions, it remains to be seen. But I think Trump did suffer a bloody nose last week when the very same Supreme Court decided against him on the issue of the acceptance of mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, Stephen.
I mean, there's so many different things to talk about when it comes to the US. It still also decides, in a way, on what happens in each state. So, if, for example, we find that Biden wins by just one electoral vote, 2 electoral votes, if the maths allows that to happen, well, then the contest goes to the courts. If we find that he wins by 10 or 11 electoral votes, well, then Trump looks, what's the word he would use? He would look like a loser if he went to court.
Pretty much, Stephen. But also, the other thing is that it's actually, we do know that Trump, for instance, Wisconsin has been called, and that's where Biden is leading with about just less than 1% or just about 1%. And as we understand that the rules of the state are that if a candidate is leading by about 1% or less, then the losing party can still request a recount. I think that's what we'll be seeing in Wisconsin. And we do know, though, that also Trump, in as much as you would prefer, in fact, if you look at the states, actually, Biden, by the conservative count of what has been declared, is just 17 votes shy. And now, if you look at what's happening in Arizona, for instance, that will give him an 11. And if you look at what happens in Nevada, if he gets Nevada, which is a traditional Democratic state, he will actually be over, he will get that threshold. But obviously the big question is what happens in Pennsylvania with 20 of those electoral college votes.
Sbu, talk to me a little bit about the transition period. If Biden wins, and I mean, from what we can see, that now looks probably to be on the cards, although we mustn't sort of, we must still sort of hedge our bets. But you can have this quite complicated, uncomfortable transition period between, Trump and Biden. It's going to remind me a little bit of what happened just after Nasrec when Jacob Zuma was still president.
Well, I think in this particular case, Stephen, we must not hold our breath and wait and hope that Trump will do a handover. He is not about to give up. He is in no mood to concede defeat, so I do not foresee any smooth transition. Obviously, it looks like this will go down to the wire and be decided by the courts. But ordinarily, I made the reference a while ago that with the last election, by 3 a.m. the following morning, the results had been Hillary Clinton had already conceded and Trump had accepted his victory. It doesn't look like this time around, and already there are all these other states where they will be contesting. So there will not be an easy transition here, Stephen. Ordinarily, we would have a swearing in January, but I don't know whether it will happen or not.
All right, Sbu Ngalwa, thanks very much indeed, our politics editor. We'll go to the